Hello, and welcome back to another theory.
Today I'm gay! Tower Defense X, a game that does not disappoint in gameplay, designs, but also lore. This will not be a regular theory video. This is to go over every major event that we are shown and piece together the lore of it. This is my biggest, longest video yet.
Hey guys, I'm so happy to have been brought on by Honeytea here. Hopefully, the two of us will be able to clear up any misconceptions you may have about the lore of TDX. The Tower Battles era is extremely long, complex, and important. In order to best explain this era of the lore, I will be presenting it like it is a story that I am reading to you, rather than stopping every 5 seconds to explain everything. In the beginning, there was nothing. Nothing but an endless void. But this isn't some arbitrary force of nature. There was the void. The void is a cosmic entity that we know very little about. John Roblox himself has referred to him as an alien elder god in development livestreams, and has stated on multiple occasions that he is much, much stronger than Calamity. Regardless of his nebulous origins, the lore starts with him. Earth in the TDX universe is not unlike our own. World wars were fought and military weapons were invented. We see this through the World War era maps and skins present in both Tower Battles and TDX, as well as the GDA's use of modern American military equipment. Technology in this world is a bit more advanced than our own, but by and large, history remains the same. Until one fateful day. Sometime in the past, the Void emerged to wreak havoc on humanity. Using his immense power, he started the dreaded zombie apocalypse. This apocalypse, we know, was both worldwide and devastating. So devastating that current governments must have collapsed under the sheer number of undead attacking them. It was during this time, in humanity's darkest hour, where their prayers needed to be answered. And they were. The armies of Earth were reunited under a new flag, the Global Defense Army, or GDA. The GDA is a paramilitary organization that, based on the eagle in their logo and their use of military equipment, is heavily based on what was left of the United States. Despite this, the GDA incorporates people from all over the world, hence the name. In Tower Battles, we see that a majority of the troops are indeed repurposed from the US military. However, we also see that they draw from police forces, the blue towers like Enforcer and Shotgunner, as well as mercenaries, such as, Commando, Mercenary, Aviator, and Huntsman and Marksman. Regardless of their background, the early GDA enlisted anyone and everyone in order to fight the Void and his army of undead. The GDA weren't all just fighters, however. Many scientific minds also joined their ranks, allowing the GDA to use futuristic laser technology. Two of these scientists were Dr. Xenon and Dr. Mallory. These two women worked in the background, improving the GDA's weaponry, whilst also developing other powerful pieces of technology. The Zeds, the Golden Towers, cloning technology, and most controversial of all, the art of revival itself. Some of the GDA, presumably the advisor, did not like this practice, due to unknown reasons. Regardless, Dr. Xenon and her scientists remain undeterred by their discoveries and creations. Unfortunately for the young GDA, the undead were not the only threat at this time. Enter Frosty, a powerful ice titan who threatened the GDA in its infancy. Dr. Xenon, alongside some other GDA troops, journeyed out to the frozen north in order to find Frosty's weakness and defeat him. They appeared to be successful, and Frosty was presumably killed. The remainder of his army fled deeper into the icy north, where one surviving Titan would plan his vengeance. Sometime later, Dr. Xenon and the advisor had a falling out over the controversial nature of her reviving people. Someone close to the Dr. Xenon had died, and the advisor had forbidden her from reviving him. Although Xenon seemingly accepted the outcome at the time, her devotion to the GDA was forever shattered. As the war with the Void and the undead reached its climax, The GDA found that their current weaponry would not be suitable to ensure the Void's destruction, so they began to search for other means of dealing with their Void problem. The solution presented itself when the GDA discovered another dimension, a hellish, desolate version of the real world, rich with powerful energy crystals. Despite her protests, the GDA convinced Dr. Xenon into taking the mysterious Calamity crystals and using them to enhance their golden soldiers. Xenon did so reluctantly at first, but she soon became enamored with the crystals as well, for her own purposes. Little did Xenon and the GDA know that their actions here would have dire consequences in the future. As Xenon worked on the Golden Towers, she must have been visited in secret by the Void himself. The being who was once her sworn enemy played off of her hatred and disdain for the GDA. The two of them formed a secret alliance, in which Xenon would secretly send some of her inventions in order to aid the Void in his final battle against the GDA's latest cadet, and the Void would command the undead to treat Xenon as an ally. Despite the alliance, Xenon finished her enhancements to the Golden Towers, although at this point, their designs had strayed far from their original intent, symbolizing the Doctor's subtle but unmistakable descent into narcissistic madness. During the final battle, despite Dr. Xenon's secret aid, the Void was overwhelmed by the overwhelming power of the Calamity-infused Golden Towers, and he was destroyed. With the Void's death, the undead ceased to be nearly as much of a problem, for now. The GDA turned their attention to dealing with the copious amounts of leftover undead. They commissioned the creation of Eradicators, giant autonomous robots capable of killing hordes of zombies in one go. With the funding and help of Forge Industries, the company that assisted Xenon with the Golden Towers, Xenon got to work creating the Eradicators. She wasn't making them for their intended purpose, however. Once they nearly finished creation, Xenon quickly revealed her true colors, turning her small army of death machines on the GDA. This was her vengeance, something that she had been plotting ever since she lost him. The GDA must have been able to fight her off, but the battle must have been brutal. Xenon took her Eradicators, as well as her Plague Division, with her, where she would take command of the undead in the Void's absence. In many cases, she would augment the zombies with robotics, creating terrifyingly powerful beings. She would also create an army of disposable, mass-produced robots known as Predators, in order to strike fear in the GDA from afar. As the GDA recovered from Dr. Xenon's betrayal, we know that they slowly but surely retired their old Tower Battles era towers and upgraded many of their troops, becoming more aggressive and militarized as they transitioned from the Tower Battles era to this new one, the era of Tower Defense X. Hey, well, would you look at the time? It seems that I gotta get going now. See you guys all next time. Bye!
The Plague Division is full of supernatural enemies, but also plague enemies that derive from the Plague Doctor. These zombies are most likely the leftover zombies from the Void, which explains why later on there are almost no natural zombies in the future modes. However, in Endless, we see that there are more than just supernaturals. This means that this division has been experimented on by Dr. Xenon to possibly do research on how the Void created this infection and possibly how to sustain it as long as possible without the Void's control. However, a lingering question I have is how Plague Doctor is here today. Plague Doctor is originally in the 1300s. His original purpose was to help patients or victims of the bubonic plague, a major disease that happened during that century. One of the badges do mention him going back to the 1300s, but also one of the night enemies have the health value 1346, the same year that the Black Death happened, killing tons and tons of people. This knight could be one of the victims of the Black Death which explains his medieval look. And it also explains why he is not usually naturally spawned, but he is raised from the dead, with few exceptions to make game modes harder, like Elite and Expert. But what does this have to do with Plague Doctor? Well, if a knight enemy from the 1300s was able to sustain his own body to look like this, couldn't it be the same for Plague Doctor? However, there is something more to it. In his chest, there are 4 cores implying that he is not a natural Plague Doctor. He is a zombie powered up by possible Calamity power sources. He even has the black wires that strap into the cores, and this is true through every other enemy that uses a power source, saying that Dr. Xenon brought him to life to fight the GDA. And if you still have a bit of doubt that Dr. Xenon did revive him, on the table we see the same tube that Plague Doctor has on his back. It cannot be because she picked it up after he died. He was broken down and there should have been broken glass or lowered fuel at least. So, Plague Doctor is a revived enemy from the 1300s or the 16th and 17th century during the Black Plague by Dr. Xenon. While most of his abilities use Dr. Xenon's technology, one ability doesn't. When he lifts up his hand, he raises the resurrected rangers and the knights from the ground. If Void was the only leader that could sustain the army, then it would be smart for Dr. Xenon to gain someone to lead a supernatural army that has similar abilities that Void has. So Dr. Xenon got Plague Doctor to keep the supernatural zombies alive, but also to build up their own army with the dead towers that they kill along the way, like resurrected rangers. I also want to point out, in the map Apocalypse, there are a lot of posters about a virus about the green flu. While yes, this may not be canon, I think the story is true. This is because the Void released a disease to infect the world and build its army, and there's even the buildings written with the word help. So while the green flu may not actually be the virus, because it's a reference to Left 4 Dead game, it still can be true that there's an infection caused by the Plague Division. And one more thing. Because of the immense research, they have gotten smarter and are able to form close relationships to one another. The evidence to back this up is the portrait of Dr. Mallory next to the Guardian that we fight during the game, and also the same Guardian that fights the Calamity minion named Adversary. If you don't know who the Eradicators are, here's a simple explanation. Imagine a zombie and shoving them into a suit. Boom, you got an Eradicator. That's really a simple explanation on what the Eradicators are. It's been established multiple times that the Eradicators are zombies or at least humanoids inside of suits. But while I was making this, I realized there is so much more than just a humanoid in a suit. But first, let's take a look at a special industry, Forge Industries, which Noel briefly talked about earlier, and I will now get in more detail with. In the propaganda, we see a logo called Forge Industries, and it is made in about every propaganda image we get. But the name Forge Industries also relates to a map called Outpost Forge, and this map is filled with propaganda we see. While we aren't really shown what logo this industry is part of, there has been a specific logo everywhere, the triangle logo. This logo is present in almost every mechanical device you see in the tower, unit, enemy, or even maps. Golden Juggernaut, XWM turrets, Eradicators, Eradidog, Vinland, Assembly Line, and more, and all of them contain this triangle logo. But how do we know for sure this logo is from Forge Industries? Well, best of luck, one of my friends made a video on this, and in the comments, Rika Forge, one of the developers of TDX, confirmed this theory, stating that the brand marking was representing Forge Industries, and from him and 2 other friends, where the developers of TDX are in-game engineers for the GDA. This means that this triangle logo is the marking of Forge Industries, but what does this have to do with Eradicators? This basically proves the fact that the GTA made these Eradicators and were taken by Dr. Xenon. What would be the point of explaining this though? Well, my friend, let me introduce you to the blueprints. This is an Eradicator blueprint made by one of the official concept artists for TDX, who mainly did other concepts for towers, enemies, and bosses. This is very similar to Eradicator Mark 1 combat, but this is supposed to show the base of an original Eradicator. So by this, we can tell what's really going on here. But as you keep looking, you will keep finding out more creepy things about this. This isn't just a humanoid inside of a suit. The humanoid is the suit. The core and a lot of wires are connected inside of the chest, while the head looks like a monster. The eyes are now robotic and the teeth are sharp. 2 tubes are connected inside of the humanoid and a lot of metal bits around his skin. So now it begs the question, who are the humanoids? Comparing them to towers is pretty weird because their sizes are incomparable. Eradicators are so much bigger than the towers. Okay, I was going to keep on going with this, but I had a chat with one of the developers, Marcus, and I got some interesting details. Marcus says that the humanoids inside of the suits aren't humans. He said that when Dr. Xenon was creating them, she was making them into superhumans, which in translation means that these organisms are in a humanoid state and are able to handle human capabilities, but hold way more power than humans. He also stated that these organisms stand at 15 meters long. That's 49 feet tall. And he also described each Eradicator in their own purpose. Eradicator Mark 1 is used for stealth purposes, which explains why he's such a hard hitter like the rest. Mark 2 is mainly a frontlines attacker because of his arsenal. Mark 4 is the defensive type of boss because of the armor and grenades. And Mark 1C is the violent type of Eradicator, and hence the name Combat, where he is extremely strong, close range. And he did say that in the future the helmets of these Eradicators will actually showcase the insides of the suits. So now with this in mind, this puts a different perspective with this world. This means that this world contains titans, or gigantic humanoid organisms that hold superhuman abilities. And some of the humanoids aren't really from anyone we know. They are just described as titans to be put inside for the suit. In the Awakened update, Eradicator Mark 4 can be seen almost everywhere, implying that there are multiple produced. But not only that, the lyrics for his song is very, very weird. The lyrics have a bit of a weird transition going from "Saw the wretched spawn in half" to the rest of the lyrics. These lyrics don't really line up. He's referencing them as in multiple beings, more likely being towers, when he says them or they. So how does this make sense? Well, I think they are in the communication system. We know for a fact that Dr. Xenon does make multiple bosses, like Apex Predators. She told us how she has more than one Apex Predator around the world. And the raid in the timeline specifically happens where Mark 4, Mark 1 Combat, and Apex Predator attack at the same time. But also, Mark 4 saw the Wretched spawn in half, so how can Mark 4 see Wretched if he is dead before Calamity spawned? It would mean that one Eradicator Mark 4 saw the Wretched and a different Mark 4 was attacking the GTA. And the last thing I want to cover for him is this line. Now, there are 2 possible outcomes. Either one, this Eradicator is currently being destroyed and through the song, it's asking for help. Another possibility is where Eradicator Mark 4 is seeking help for what he has become. He also screams when he dies, which might relate that he's in pain. But I can see either one of these 2 being true. I did previously make a video on this, but it sucked to be honest. And now I'm here with more logic and some new theories, so let's start off with Dr. Xenon's companion, Dr. Mallory. Dr. Mallory was a companion to Dr. Xenon, and they were both major characters in the Tower Battle storyline. They both worked on machinery and seemed to build a bond, at least from Dr. M's perspective. As time went on, Dr. Xenon started to become more desperate, and one day, Dr. Xenon sadly sacrificed Dr. Mallory as a last-minute resort to summon Calamity to attack the GDA. After that, we only see glimpses of her in a few lore drops where she is crying and or in distraught. And sadly, that's how her story ends. Or so we thought. A slight issue with the supposed theory is that it does not mention where she is now. After the Awakened, we just skimmed onto the Frost invasion, but that's only because we have been missing important key details, and most importantly, the way the sacrificial system works. The way that this works is not where you just sacrifice a loved one or trusted one and they're gone forever. But what the Calamity does is clone their appearance and keep the real one in their army. This is supported by the fact that there are redacteds in chapter 2 proving that they are clones, and eventually Mr. P sends an image saying Masks of Sorrow. There's a ton of vile seraphs that are part of the army, depicted crying, especially with Dr. Mallory in the middle. So this very well means that Dr. Mallory is now a vile seraph, and the redacteds we do see aren't really her, but just random copies. But if that's the case, then where could she be? Well, in chapter 3, we see a poster showing a demon queen above the heretic with the title Goddess of Vengeance, which would make sense for her character. This could possibly be Dr. Mallory after her sacrifice. The Calamity is a faction that is mainly a cult worshipping the Calamity. One thing I don't believe is the case that the Calamity we fight in Endless isn't the most powerful devil, because the Wretched says that he was a scout. This makes me believe that there is a hierarchy in the faction, and there are possibly more leaders in the Calamity faction like Heretic, Engineer, Wretched, and the Goddess of Vengeance. However, an interesting detail that the faction has is the amount of technology that they are able to use. Yeah, some technology is Calamity infused, but others seem very robotic. This ties in with the Engineer. The Engineer is no boss to look over. He's mostly described as the boss who created about every machinery in this faction.
He created the nail golems, tanks, dreadnoughts, corrupted predators, and other automatons that they use. He bred and grew the twitching vials to become maze guardians and wendigos. He reprogrammed Xenon's predators, Apex Predator, and Mark II. He possesses actual magic mixed together with machinery, as seen with the cybernetic pulse, EMP, and his interplay with the Heretic. He is also the one who took Xenon's factory and who used the Void Hearts and connected them to the modern portal frames in order to link his dimension to ours.
He made it all. One of the lines show this too. Engineer didn't just create new inventions. He overrides some of Dr. Xenon's inventions to help fight with him against us. There is, however, one thing that has bothered me for a long time. How is Eradicator Mark II and Apex Predator back? It's actually never really explained why. The closest we can get is John talking about the corrupted Apex Predators in one of his streams.
And he does have a bit of his original armor on his shoulder right here, because he still managed to fight against the corruption, I guess, in some way.
You might think that this is a continuity error, because how is Apex Predator still alive to experience the corruption, but it's not an error. We know that Dr. Xenon makes multiple bosses, which means that this Apex Predator was from a different region that was taken over by the corruption. However, this does not apply for Mark II.
Corrupted Eradicator indicates, you guys can see he's more purpleized, things like that, because the Awakened is mostly purple of color. You can see he's more zombified. This is definitely corrupt. It is not the same guy, or it's the same sort of armor it takes in design, things like that, but it is not from Dr. Xenon.
Although he does say it's the same design, he's not actually from Dr. Xenon, so how could this make sense? The case seems to be that either the Awakened built him as a distorted memory, which seems unlikely, or is that the Awakened has taken the parts of the destroyed Mark II and rebuilt him. That's why the only real flesh is the head, but everything else is purple. Because when he died, his arms went flying and his head was gone, with only the torso and the legs exploding and being burnt. And look at the concept. Purple new arms, destroyed body and legs, and same head. So while Apex Predator was most likely a different boss in another region, Eradicator Mark II may be the fallen pieces that have been put together with some dark magic or witchcraft.
DJ said that I would be deeply disappointed when it is figured out. So, these seems to be useless. If there were something that could actually
This was a past theory, trying to explain what these barcodes mean, and they actually represent a book explaining how the body may not actually be yours. Now, I could make a possible review on this book and make a crazy theory on the dark story on how zombiosis works, but what I really want to figure out is what he means in the comments, that my analysis of the songs were very dangerously close. I put them in the numbered order and read their title names, and they represented the storyline on the events that happened around the world. But what could be the final piece that we're missing? Could the names be not only referring to the events, but who we are talking about? Okay, let me set some examples. In the premonition, it refers to the feeling of something bad going to happen, which is most likely the highlight before the Calamity spawned. Another is the Hell energy. Although it's unknown whether or not this is during the events of when Calamity first spawned, we can probably accept the fact that something evil was in Earth. But what makes me believe that is that the image was taken in the Chapter 4 map before it was destroyed. This means that the energy was increasing slowly either when Calamity spawned or right after Calamity disappeared and before the Awakened went to Earth. Okay, getting it now? Let's continue. The Call to War references the Earth fighting the Awakened, and you can hear marching in the very beginning. The Shriek, although it may be difficult to deal with, is most likely the fact that the villagers that lived in the settlement in Chapter 1 was corrupted. And of course, the shrieking would make sense. And in Heresis, the lyrics also say hear them screaming. The quiet may be a bit tricky to deal with, but it's most likely the quiet events that play out, or an event like the premonition, when everything goes quiet. The little chainsaw that could is probably a reference to a story about how something so little can do either great things or at least something big. The haunted whispers are the demons on Earth like the Banshee. But what about hypnosis? We can probably see that some would need to be hypnotized because not everybody would see the perspective of the corrupted. While there are some villagers that are corrupted, it would make sense for others to not fall but must be under hypnosis. Heretic even has a book that casts spells to benefit enemies around him, so I don't think there wouldn't be a page about hypnosis. And the rest are either random names or names that you can easily piece together. Now, could this actually be what the titles mean? Probably not, but oh well, that's over with. Okay, so my first video I have ever used my voice on this channel. But please let me know how I sound or if I should continue using my voice. I feel free.